Welcome to today's episode of a Cowgirls World Tour podcast. In today's world tour, we are exploring Thailand, Japan, and North American culture with my cousin-in-law, Bill Hemstapat. Bill is originally from Thailand, who has now lived in the US for 12 years and is a successful composer / music designer. We chatted everything from culture to language to his music career and the music industry itself. And honestly, we got so into it. We ended up recording for close to 2 hours. So today's episode is going to be part 1 of our chat where we dive into more of the culture and languages between Thailand, Japan, and North America, and also how he pursued his dream and what we think everybody is worthy of doing when it comes to pursuing what we want in life. I had so much fun getting to know Bill a lot more and really enjoyed having thought-provoking conversations. And I think you're going to love it too. Let's get started.
I love it.
All right, this is exciting. Well, hello, Bill.
Hello, Jenny. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, welcome to my show.
Nice. What is it called again? Is it the
It's called a Cowgirls World Tour.
That's right. Cowgirls World Tour. Hello, Cowgirl World Tour. Thank you to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I was so excited. And especially because we're family.
Yes, we
right?
are family. Legally,
but
that
legally?
is. Yes.
Is there like a word for, you know how you can say like sister-in-law?
Yeah, this is like
a
cousin-in-law. Is that a thing? I'm gonna look this up right now, actually.
I don't know if it's a thing.
Cousin-in-law a thing? Actually,
this
is a common thing that people look up. Yes, a cousin-in-law is a relative by marriage, so it is a thing.
It's an actual word?
Yeah, it's an actual word. And it says, while there is no legal reason behind the name, your cousin-in-law is a relation on your family tree as this person married your cousin. Wait, yes. Yeah, I married your cousin.
Yes.
So legally, there is no reason why it should matter, but from a social point of view, it is important to know how you are related to this person.
Well, yeah, because there's a family relationship. And I was thinking, I'm like, I want to introduce you. And I'm like,
I'm
is
your
there a word? We're
cousin-in-law.
I love it.
Are we the same age? You're born 94? 93?
I'm 94.
I'm 94 also.
Sweet. Wow. Same age too.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically know nothing about each other.
No, not very much at all. Aside from, the one long conversation we had 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, however long that was.
Like a 20-minute, half an hour conversation.
Nice.
And I think I briefly mentioned the podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
It's great.
And the theme kind of what I'm going for is like, because of course my background, and too, like I want that different culture, like different experiences and stories, but also like, people doing cool shit around the world. Maybe you're from Japan, or maybe you're from a different country like yourself. And basically, and so like I think it's valuable to share those stories for people who are wanting to maybe go do something outside of a small town or a small world, and like wanting to maybe pursue what they really want to do.
Yeah.
And if I can
or maybe not.
or not. Yeah, 100%. And then if it even inspires like one person, or if it's just entertainment, some cool, story that people get to hear, I think it's pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. So I don't even know. So you grew up in Thailand, right?
Yeah. I moved to the US when I was 18.
And that's funny because I also moved to Canada when I was 18.
Oh, nice. So you finished your high school over there, essentially.
I did. But so did you, what's the English like learning in Thailand like?
Yeah, the proficiency. It's interesting. So first of all, I need to give most of the credit to my dad.
Okay.
He went to school in Hong Kong and the States. So like he was a Thai person born in the Chinese family in Thailand.
Yeah.
So his father, so my grandfather, who's passed now, he came from mainland China in the 1920s. So then, obviously because of that, he had these sort of beliefs in he has beliefs in like the sort of like that, like, oh, Hong Kong is like the prime of education in somehow. So he sent my dad to boarding school over there ever since he was like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And so my dad went to school in Hong Kong, which of course the English speaking there is pretty decent in comparison to mainland China, because they were part of the British Empire for so many years. It was his father's belief that the education over there would get my dad farther away. So education has kind of always been a theme in the family. And then he chose to go abroad and study in America for his college degree in computer science, because that's
so your dad went to the States for school too?
My dad came to the States for school, but he only stayed for school for those 4 years at University of Washington the state, not Washington DC. And also it was because computer science as a field, it was really the field that's heavily advanced in America. I didn't understand it at the time, but now seeing it, like, I was like, oh, it would make sense because, all the Silicon Valley stuff started over here. And, at the time, Japanese innovation, which kind of didn't come until like the 50s, 60s, that exploded the electronics market. Like that was something that also came from the Americans going over there with their sort of like, post-war, we want to revive the economy kind of mindset, but all the innovations kind of came over here. So there were a lot of praises around the world that like, oh, like if you want to study computers, you got to go to America. And this was in the 80s essentially that my dad did that.
Yeah. Cool. So he spoke English pretty fluently.
Pretty fluently, and I saw him speak English at work. So that was kind of the major point of inspiration. He also like sort of kind of like really whipped down on me of just like, hey, you need to be able to speak English. It's the language of the world. You need to be able to do that. But really, what kind of made it make sense to me was the fact that like he was on these calls with his clients in the States at night, because it would be the morning over here, and I would be home after school at that time. And I would like, he always complained about this one dude, that it was one of his like regional operations manager of sort. So basically someone above him, but it's in the office in America. His name is CK. And then he always complains about this guy CK, like complaining about these things. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, and like I get to watch him fight with this guy on a phone in English. And I thought it was a thing that kind of made me go like, oh, I want to speak that language. I want to understand what my dad's fighting with CK about, which was what a strange thing to be into. But like, I really believe that inspired me to want to do well in English, because I felt like there was a part of his world that I don't know about, and I want to know about it.
Yeah, I bet. But then, were you extra into it than like other people in school?
Yeah, I would say so. Although it didn't mean that I was good, because so when I had to do this, like the competency exam, so they have you do the TOEFL exam for America, right?
Yes.
Not the IELTS for British. I failed like twice before I got the correct score to come to the States the third time. Like I think it's scored out of 120 or something. And to come to the States for the university I was trying to get into, they want 80. They want 80 out of 120 proficiency. The first time I did it, I got 55. And then I studied really hard some more and then took some courses. And then I got 66, I think, the second time. It was not a lot. And then the third time I was kind of losing hope already. And I was like, I'm just gonna watch a bunch of English speaking video. I wasn't gonna study anymore, like traditionally study, but I was gonna mock their accent to the level of like it's like should feel comical that I'm speaking incorrect grammar but with a good accent. I was like, I wanted to go that route because I was like, I'm a musician, I'm good at listening, I want to do the thing that will get me through the test. And sure enough, the third time I got 80 bang on.
Just what you needed.
Yeah, just what I needed. And like, oh my God, my dad cried, I cried, and I was like, God damn those YouTube videos. Like, I just watched like the interview with my favorite band at the time, you know, like they just talk about stuff like it's a Paramore video, a Linkin Park video, Dream Theater, and I just watched them talk about music and such, and I just mock their accents.
Yeah. Well, and you probably have you have good ears, right? Being musically inclined.
Yeah.
Too. So that's really good. So you had to there was a speaking test obviously too.
Yeah. Speaking and listening. Yeah. I did my worst in writing. Actually, it might have been reading that was the worst that I did because I had a lot of holes in my vocabulary that I just didn't understand. Now thinking back to it now, this doesn't matter anymore. Like now the whole Google Chrome translate thing just did everything for you and you could like look up every vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like right away. You could just highlight and have it translate. Like that's such a crazy thing now. But back then I really didn't I didn't possess a lot of vocabularies. And then the writing I was also weak at because grammatically I wasn't great. But I knew I could kind of do well with faking the speaking, and then my listening comprehension was good because I listened to all these videos, obviously. So I try to get those two to the maximum, and I got like 27 out of 30 in those sections or something. Right. And then my reading was like 15 out of 30, and then writing was like 18 or something.
But you got enough. You got enough to get in. Yeah.
So that was my major starting point. And then I would say that because my first place that I landed in the States was Cincinnati, Ohio. So a lot more rural, not as much immigrant structures around the city. It really forced me to have to basically become one with the locals, essentially, or else I'm just not accepted. So I have American roommates all the way through college, and like, we hang out and they teach me stuff, and I adopt the way that they speak, which is why my English is a little more street than other people. And I have the most I don't know, random vocabularies that Steph would kind of go like, why do you speak that way? It's kind of weird. Oh well.
You'd learn from the locals. Yeah,
exactly. What about yourself? How was, I mean, you had you have a Canadian dad. So there's that.
I was lucky because I've never really had to learn it as a second language. Yeah, because I was back and forth. Because my dad and Shar, they lived in Japan till about I was 5, I think.
Okay.
So and I know why, because my dad can't speak any Japanese.
Really? To this day still?
After living in Japan for 10 years, and
wow.
Shar too. I mean, they know some words, but
they can't go to the store and be like, kurechi toka to wa suke.
No, I think you'll be better. You're better at it. But anyway, so he's like, I need her to speak English fluently, or we're not having a relationship kind of thing.
Right.
And that was really important to him, thankfully. So by the time I was speaking both English and Japanese fluently.
Cool.
By then. But I feel the same. My vocabulary weren't great, especially what you speak up until you're 5 is very, very easy. Yeah. Easy words. So
very
after random. Right? And so I never had, so my accents are great, but after that, growing up in Japan, I never really progressed as much. So I struggled with struggled with like harder words and having like a proper conversation as like a young adult.
Yeah.
And especially the English, like, you know, English we learn in Japan, like in regular school, is terrible.
It's probably also the fact that you guys have like romanji and like katakana type stuff that kind of helps aid you so much in the learnings of it that it's hard to just kind of hard force someone to be like, yo, you can only like write and speak in English only.
Yeah. I know katakana, honestly, I think like just kills it, because they just speak it, it's English, but they're just speaking it in a Japanese way.
Like I could only imagine when you can actually go out there, and this happens in Thai too, where we would spell a certain word a certain way as a readout for English, but it isn't really quite the thing of how they read it, essentially. Like, I mean, like I was just saying earlier, like credit card, for example, you would always see a Japanese person try to say their katakana version of credit card, as opposed to actually just say credit card, because that's just what they're used to their entire life. So yeah, I could see how it being kind of like a confusing thing and counterproductive to learn English using katakana as kind of like a bridge.
I'm sure it started off as an aid, right? Like to kind of help as a bridge to help that gap, but now it's just like a completely different language. And they even have they'll make words in katakana like it sounds English. They probably even think they like use it thinking it's English, but it's a complete made up, like a Japanese made up English word. Like it's funny.
Just for anything foreign, right? That's not in the traditional
totally
Japanese sense. I totally get that. When I started learning it, it was really confusing to me. Like I don't speak Japanese very well. I know very little. It's like baby level business Japanese, but I just from having to try to learn to comprehend some katakana, it was confusing to me of like, wait, what is this? Why?
I think and learning the actual alphabets would, because then we have hiragana, katakana, and then kanji is a whole nother level of confusingness. It would be, I think it would be a really hard language to learn. But then I don't know if you've tried, but like, you know how English and like A can sound different sounds, right? And that's so confusing. But at least in Japanese, your alphabets, like,
they always sound the same way.
It always sounds the same. So as long as you know the alphabets and it's, let's say it's in hiragana, you can always read what it says. So I think
you might not know what it means, but you could always get through. However, not in like how do I say, like advanced publications though, because then they would start using kanji, and then you'd be like, what is this one? And then I just use my phone to scan it.
Then you're totally. Then you're done. And it's interesting. Not that I don't want to talk so much about Japanese, but it's an interesting language because by using kanji, and I'm trying to explain this, by using kanji, you can kind of, let's say there's a paragraph, and then you can kind of like just scan through the paragraph, and because the kanji kind of tells you the shapes and like of what kind of it's talking about, you can understand without really reading. So if I had like an English paragraph about something and then a Japanese paragraph,
it's a very horizontal taxing
side by
reading,
side, right? English, you have to literally read every single thing to really understand what it's talking about. And then but then Japanese, the kanji actually helps you, like, you tell you the story almost.
It has really a lot more nuance of expression there than English words. And what's funny about English is that the more nuanced you want to be, the more vocabularies you add.
Yeah.
Especially in corporate English, for example, where you know you don't want to offend anyone and you want to write it in the most diplomatic way possible. So like a simple as sentence is like, hey, you fucked this up, becomes like this like 3 paragraphs explaining, you know, like your performance doesn't meet the established quality bar, whatever it is, right? And then it becomes this really annoying thing to understand. And I see difficulties actually. So for the audience, I worked at Sony Interactive Entertainment for 4.5 years. So I had to deal with some Japanese workers in our Japan office. And I do see their struggles to not comprehend, to like kind of translate backward, where they were trying to say this thing that they could easily say in kanji, and like using kanji in a sentence, and they would write an email and it would be like this full paragraph explaining a situation of something. And then someone once told me that like, oh, like this is just a simple expression that could have been like a very short 2-character kanji thing that doesn't really exist in English. So I got to see some of those.
Yeah, that's right. That's cool. You know, I didn't even we skipped introduction.
Yeah, that's fine. We had the introduction.
It's like we'll get
should
there.
I do one, or should I just
let's say, tell us like in a minute
using kanji,
who you are. Right, who you are and what you do.
My name is Bill Hemstapat. I am a composer. I am also a music designer. This is a video game language now, but I make music essentially for video games. I currently live in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Thailand, and I came over here 12 years ago. I'm 30 years old now, and it's been a very interesting journey, you know, to get from a country that is not so like known for its entertainment and media, and wanting to come to a place like Los Angeles that is kind of the metropolitan of the entertainment industry, and wanting to make a living here. So that's kind of a short version of my story.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And something I was just thinking about when, you know, you were talking about how in the corporate setting, and then you have to kind of use all these fancy words to tell something.
Me.
Yeah. Now, is Thai culture very direct?
No. So actually, it's non-direct, but it in like a catty kind of way. You would fake it. Like
funny.
Like you, instead of, so I would say that in English, let's say, how do I say this? Let me use this as an example. I wanted to say your horse looks a little weird. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the direct version. I, as an English speaking person, would say that now because I feel comfortable with myself, and I would probably say it that like, oh, like your horse is a little weird.
Yeah.
Corporate English would be, hey Jenny, have you ever thought about what the standard of normal looking horse, of ordinary looking horse would look like? And would you consider whether your horse fits those criteria? And if it doesn't, that's totally okay. I'm just curious. That would be corporate English, right?
Yeah.
So on the other hand, would be like out front, I would just literally say your horse is beautiful. I would just be like, oh my God, your horse? So beautiful. And I would actually try to trap you into you saying that your horse is weird somehow. It's through manipulation of words that like I keep saying. It's like, oh my God, like the torso, it's like so big, like it's so great. And then you were like, yeah, actually his torso kind of looks a little weird. And then I would go, yeah, yeah, maybe you're right. Like, you know, so it's a very catty kind of like society where we don't.
So funny.
We don't want to be directly criticizing the other people. But let's say that I fail to trap you into the conversation where you admit to your horse's weird lookingness. I would go to my friends and be like, oh my God, can you believe Jenny's horse just looks kind of weird? You know what I mean? It's a very strange society, and we don't actually know how to speak directly to one another. So I never actually got to work as a professional in Thailand. I've done freelance work in Thailand, so I never did the corporate Thai. I don't know what that's like over there.
Yeah.
But I bet there is a version of it that exists that feels a lot more like diplomatic and feels a lot more inclusive. And it probably has its own way of saying that your horse looks weird, but it's kind of I think like non-offensive language is one of those skills that kind of like you develop over time, and everyone has their own different versions. But on the culture as a whole, because we as a country, we don't really have like free speech as like a value that we embody as Thai people. So the ability to walk out there and criticize someone is it's like very frowned upon. Like you don't want to do that.
Yeah, same in Japan too. Yeah.
Like and America is just very common. You just like make these random remarks at people. It's to the point where it's kind of become a little bad, I honestly.
Yeah, I agree. No, because we have to read the air. Right? Like
comprehension of the temperature in the room, right?
Yeah. And if you don't, it's like people would hate you because it's like, what are you doing? Like you're too weird and awkward. Like you don't fit in.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing as like classrooms, right? Like where, like teachers would ask, like, does anyone have questions? And if you like raising your hand in a classroom environment in Thailand, it's kind of like I'm sure it's similar to Japan, where it's like an attention drawing social circumstance where you don't want to be that guy who raised their hand and asked these smart ass questions, right? So like when I came to America, I felt like I could be wrong about this, but I could be like enabled to be more myself, because I'm sure there were some catty people that was like, oh my god, can you believe Bill asked these questions again? Actually, Steph was one of those people who, like, when I was asking questions in class and she was like, oh fuck, here we go again. But it was kind of like in a way that's slightly less non-judgmental. It wasn't like the kids are not going to be friends with you if you ask too many questions or something like that.
And it's very much so that way in growing up in Japan too.
I could only imagine.
Yeah. It's like who does she think she is? Like teacher's pet? Like
And I think that's why, what's interesting about Japanese media is, especially like things like shonen animes or like things that are like made for adolescents, is it goes very deeply into this idea that like, oh, like the underdog person that asks so many questions is actually like the person that has all these superpowers or whatever, right? It's kind of like it's trying to subliminally help the person who feels like they're an odd one out, that feels like, oh, they can be that too.
For sure. As a culture, like it's so interesting. Like because I went back and forth, and I basically was like two completely different like people, like persons. Like I had two completely different personalities being in Japan, and then I would be visiting. Like as I got older, I think I was a lot more I was very very Japanese in my like teen years, because I wanted to be like my friends, and that's
your
what I did.
friend groups that you surround yourself with.
But when I was younger, I would spend like 2 months like in the summer here in Canada, and I was like a completely different person, like outgoing and like do this and that, and then I would go back, and then I was like,
me as a Canadian now, actually.
I feel like there's a change. I feel there's been a change in me now too.
Yeah.
English.
Do you still feel like if you go back to Japan, you could turn on that persona of being a Japanese person again, or no?
It's harder. I find it harder now. Like I'm very Canadian. Like I even feel I'm very Canadian when I'm in Japan.
Wow, that's actually interesting.
It is interesting.
I find that that's such a strange thing to think about. So I had somewhat of an opposite experience from you in college. So I became ultra American during college years. I want to be like, fuck it all. I don't care about, like I just don't want to be Thai anymore. And all these communal values, I don't care. I want individualisms, such and such. And as I progressed further and further in my life, I really felt like that actually isn't quite who I am. Like it felt weird. So I have kind of come back to discover my roots of, like liking the communal values of what I had in Thailand. And I think I started noticing the biggest change that felt very small in retrospect, but I think is huge, is I start saying English sentences like this. I go, in Thai, there is this phrase, and then I would use the phrase in Thai, and then which basically means such and such, and we would say it to use this. Where like instead of trying to appease to the Americans by using most commonly understood slangs or phrases, I'd actually lift a Thai phrase and use it in a sentence, and I would go an extra mile to explain to people what that phrase means, even though it's in a completely foreign language. Because I really felt like there shouldn't be a need for me to validate my experience to other people. And on the other hand, I wish to also provoke more curiosity about my upbringing as opposed to making people assume that I'm just American. Because that was kind of a lot of the feedback that I get. That they don't say it to me directly, but like the sort of the mental feedback that I get from folks during my college years, going into my first couple of years of my career, was that people just thought that I was an American born. And I was like, something is off here because I don't feel that way. I feel very disconnected from a lot of parts of the American culture. I have some of those that I like, but not everything. It was not a conscious effort, but I felt like lately I've really been a lot more mindful about like, hey, I don't need to hide a lot of the Thai-isms that I have. If I want to use a certain phrase because it reminds me of something, it's like when the Japanese uses the phrase like shoganai, it's like a very like, that's so specific to that culture. There's no direct translation. Like I mean the easiest translation is kind of like what are you gonna do, kind of thing. But
it's the nuance.
It doesn't quite capture that, right? And I know that because it actually translated back to Thai better. Shogunai, it actually has a much more closely tied expression to a different thing that we have. And I feel that it's mostly because we're in the sort of East Asian culture, and it's a lot easier to kind of like bond over those type of values, right? Whereas over here, like there's not really a lot of that kind of expression where someone would just accept the situation as they are, keep their head down, and just drink their sorrows away, and then wake up the next day and go to work the same thing. It's a very much like a working class, but also like respecting the elders, respecting your work boss or whatever. Whereas here, I feel like everyone, like we want to have a conversation about why this thing isn't working, disregarding the seniority in society or sort of your the levels at your job or whatever. So it's a very different mentality, but I feel like a Japanese person shouldn't have to try to like hide this kind of expression for them to feel like themselves. They should just straight up use it and then be like, like we have this phrase in Japanese called shogunai, which we would use in this specific situation. It means such and such. And then like it kind of provokes a little bit of more curiosity from
that's true
your direct community around you, right? You know what I mean?
That's true. And but like so many, I think, especially like in Japan now, like they really want to be like westernized, like they have this like thing of, we got to be like America, right? Like we do this because it's America, and it's a lot of the things are, and there's certain things that's good for the country and the culture too, but it would be nice to because the culture is real. It is they have a really rich culture, and
it's a long-standing country.
It's a long there is a long history, and there is things like the roots, and I would hope that, you know, we would try and keep that going and not get so westernized.
But I think like when a Japanese person says that there's some things that should be westernized, I think they don't quite comprehend like what that really means in general. I think they want to be in Thailand anyway, from my perspective, when they say they want to be Western, they want things to be more like the Western countries. I think they want things to be more materialized, like in like materialism kind of way.
Yeah.
Would they want like, you know, complete free speech and things like this that we have, where we don't call each other by our elders? What's it called? Like the word that you put in front of someone's name, prefix, or something like that. Like, would we ever want to truly go that way? I bet you even some of the young people don't want to. They just don't understand the effect that has in like it being an actual practice. I sound like an old head kind of saying this, but it's kind of like, yeah, you don't know what that means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of the time where we like, I wish I don't have to call so and so by like remember I'm sure you have to do this all the time, but in Japanese airport, you'd call someone and follow by sama, which is like such a like high honor customer and stuff like that, right? Like in American culture, you just go like, "Hey Jenny, could you come to the counter?"
Literally.
and I'm like, it's like, do you actually want to lose that entire thing entirely? Because adding sama at the end of a customer's name already it philosophically put you in a service mode without actually even like having to actually have like a working agreement about it or anything, right? When you work in a company and you're going to service someone's department, adding san at the end of their name shows a good deal of respect, and you know, it acknowledges the seniority. Whereas in America, I feel like I have to like go to different departments explaining who I am, how long I've been at the company, what I do at the company at all times. It feels like everyone is equal, and it makes it really hard to validate yourself. Not that I hate it, because it comes with a certain perks where like I could be a junior person bringing up some very deep systemic problems, and I have found a lot of success in getting those things solved. But I think we as society are a little bit confused still about like what it means to have these honorifics and you know, the seniority and stuff like that, especially with among the young folks.
That's kind of deep, actually.
I know.
That's kind of cool. It's so true. And there is something to say, like the beautiful, like the beauty in certain things, like in the service sectors, or like it really shows their
like you would agree with me, right? Like that, like Japan probably has one of the most like rich service industry one could ever see, in terms of the amount that they go for customers, and the amount of respect that they give to their customers. So similarly to the way that the government serves the people of the country, like there was this video that circled around a long way back. I think the prime minister like apologized for failing the country, and then like left or something like that, and he like bowed so many times, and it seemed like a very small thing, but that's for that to be the expectation of the country from a leader level. Hey, like that is not easy to create for a whole country to follow this sort of, you know, this line of culture. And I have a lot of sort of like upcoming Thai musicians talk to me sometimes about how like, oh, it must be nice, you know, that you could work with anyone at any age, no honorifics whatsoever, and that must allow much better collaboration, such and such. And I was like, actually, it like almost like feels the opposite for me at some point in time, because not having honorifics as a professional who knows what they're doing. I could have any fresh graduate kids come and challenge me at any time.
Yeah.
And like,
Yep.
not that I don't welcome that, but
Yep.
I to have to train myself to be well versed in argumentative conversations with younger generations isn't a skill that I was aiming to learn, but ended up having to learn one anyway, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always like the pros and the cons. There's
Yeah.
always the good side and the bad side, and I love like the individualism and having the freedom, and you know, like you said, anybody, it keeps you on your toes, right? Like, because
Yeah.
any young kid could come up and have this cool like music or whatever, and
Yeah.
where sometimes when it's the other way and it's more seniority, and the older generation can get kind of lazy, or you know, I'm gonna get this because I'm like, I've been here for 20
they
years.
become more content and a lot more like I don't know, like lazy is probably the most casual direct word to describe it, for sure. There are cons from both sides, and I think you as an individual person have to kind of realize that like you have to choose these personalities and the cultures not from the borders of your country, but just for yourself. Like just don't do the thing where like, oh, because I live in this country I have to do this, or like I work for a certain company, so I have to follow this company culture. It's like, just you kind of have to sort of like realize that this isn't meant to be for everyone. It happens to be the thing that a lot of people in that specific saturated community are doing, but you don't have to do that. You got to find your own ways of interacting with the world around you that makes sense to you, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's cool shit.
Tell me about working for Air Canada, because I'm actually curious of what the culture is like, not just Air Canada, but in a sense where like, because you work out of a small island of Comox, right? So like, I'm pretty damn sure that not a lot of people are exposed to someone of a Japanese heritage like yourself, and I'm curious on what that's been like.
Well, it's in the working sense, Air Canada is a very old school, like a corporate seniority type of company. So everything is very much based on it, and again, there's good and there's the bad, but very much seniority based. Like, we have a lot of older like generations still working, and also because back in the day, like it used to be more of a career. You know, like a flight attendant, and you know, working for an airline was like a huge, you know, a career. And so
it was an honor as well.
It was an honor.
It's an honor to be serving such and such airline.
So we do have a lot of older generations still working in the workplace. There's, again, I find I've struggled a lot with not being able to go after certain opportunities, being a go-getter, and I'm like, I want to go do this, and I want to be a trainer, I want to be a lead, I want this position, I want to go to this other base and do this training. And a lot of those things were like restricted because that person gets to do it because they've been there for 20 freaking years.
Right.
So I've had like my fair share of struggle with that. But then being on the island, it's definitely a different environment compared to, like, say, even Vancouver. I mean, you go to Vancouver and there's, Asians everywhere. But then you come over here and it's very white predominant.
100%. It's like it feels like not in a bad way, but it does feel like this is like the retirement village, essentially, in many ways.
And there's a bit of a, it's being a smaller town. Not many, a lot of people like are from here. Well, either they grew up here and they're still here, or then a lot of maybe the older generation are coming here from other places in the world because because they want to live on this beautiful island. So I don't know if I like, for me, like it works. I love it because of the horses.
Yeah, you have space for your horse for sure.
Yeah, like I live in a perfect setup, and I get to live on a ranch. I get to like ride horses and go after my dreams, and I'm like kind of moving along in the right direction finally. But
really, you feel like you weren't actually, all your past experience didn't lead you to here? You felt like you just started over? Or
no, I'd
say like this knowing very little about what happened to you.
Like I don't feel like I'm starting over, but I feel that, and every single experience and every single thing I've done, I've learned, and they're all lessons. But when I think back, I'm like, when I was 15, I wanted to freaking train horses. Like,
oh wow,
I wanted to train horses when I was 15.
And that came out of nowhere, or did that, like, did you have like some previous experience of horses that are very profound to you?
Yeah, like I was that horse crazy girl, like the typical crazy girl. And I honestly, I don't know where, the only thing, because it's only myself and Marin that pretty much rides in like the family, even like considering our cousins and all that. And I know Granny did ride a little bit when she was younger. We found out. But
we found out as if she was trying to hide it from you.
But apart from that, like, it's not really in our family.
Yeah. Not on your mom's side of family either?
Not on my mom's side, not on Char's side. Yeah, so, but it came from somewhere, and from like this little Jenny was like going after horses wherever she could go. And I literally wanted to go to this like jockey school out of like junior high.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I mean, and I didn't, and life happens, and and you're right. I think a lot of the things I got to experience along the way has made me into kind of the person I am now, and I'm probably a better person because of it to now be doing it. But it does feel like, I'm really just getting started on the thing I love to do, and so it's been a journey.
Congratulations to you. You get to now live the life you want to live, which is great. But I think here's an interesting subject, I think, because there are a lot of people who will say things like a life that I want, I can't live like that. What are you talking about? That's crazy. And I think the innocent version of Ultra. So like when I was 15, actually, I went to I didn't go to high school. I went to a performing arts conservatory for like an equivalent of a high school program. Yeah. But it was all music focused.
Yeah.
And
just wait. Did you always want to do music?
So I actually didn't. That was funny. Okay. So like when I was like 6 or 8, I wanted to be a professional tennis player. That's what cool. I wanted to do. And then like up until 12, my dad was the one that really was like, hey, you should like start learning some music, just like all the other kids, which is fine. And then he forced me into learning piano, which I was very thankful for today, because it was kind of the basis of all of my training. But up until the age of 12, it was like very much like a tennis. I really wanted to go after this thing. I entered some competitions and I failed, but I was like, I'm not going to give up. I wanted to do this. But then we moved. So like my family moved over from Bangkok to Chiang Mai, which is it's a lot more rural at the time, and there weren't as many tennis courts, let alone tennis coaches that are willing to teach at a high level
Right.
consistently. That's just not a career that people have in that part of the city.
Yeah.
So it naturally kind of dropped itself off, and you know, they looked at what's available around so that I could still do my extracurriculars because they think that's so important. One was, there was like this piano school that, you know, they were like, oh, like maybe you should go do a couple of tries of the lesson with this person. And then I ended up keeping the piano from just the logistical standpoint of tennis not being available, and I needed something else to do, right?
Wow.
So for like my hunger for the sport side of things then turned into me getting into a marching band instead, because I wanted to do something physical, and
Yeah.
that kind of actually gave me the opportunity to do both, you know, playing music but also doing the marching band thing, which was kind of physical. And then I was just like, I wanted to explore more of this music stuff. Like I just didn't like, in high school you actually have to pick your focus in Thailand. It's either you're gonna go the math and science route, or you're gonna go the social and language route.
Yeah.
And I was like, neither of those interest me. Now if I were to think of it now, I would have probably done well in the social and language, and like, you know, social communications and language, whatever it's called. I probably would have found a lot of interesting things there. But I was just like, is there such a thing as a focus in music? And then my flute teacher at the time was like, hey, like, you are good, you know that, right? And I was like, yeah, but like, what can I really do with that? And then he handed me this application, and I was just like, it's like straight out of a movie, you know, where I didn't even know the school existed. And then he was just like, here's this application, fill it out, talk to your dad, there's an application fee, and you have to go do the audition in Bangkok, and there is like a few tests that you have to do. But I think we can get you in there if you know, we work a little harder on such and such. And I think they managed to, I don't know what magic all my music teachers had to do in order to convince my parents that I was worthy of going. Because at first he was very, my dad specifically was very rejective of the idea. He was very much like, God, if my son's gonna be a musician, it's gonna be like those annoying neighbor next doors back when we lived in Bangkok. They always play loud music, so disrespectful, and they just drink themselves to death. And I was just like, I'm not gonna be like that. I fucking want to play flute in a concert hall, you know? Like, that's a very different lifestyle. We'll drink wine and shit. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way at that time.
No.
But I don't think it was always about us knowing what we wanted to do, but it was the notion alone of, why did society reject this idea? And I think I went after the tennis thing because it felt like everyone was saying that that's impossible to do. Like, there's no Thai tennis player out there. And then sure enough, there was one. And then he really inspired me. And I was like, I'm going to be like the second tennis player. Whatever, right? And then with this music thing, the more you get rejected, the more curious you get of like, why is this such a forbidden thing?
Yeah.
And you kind of go explore it. And I feel like there are almost two types of people, I guess, when, like, for coming back around to what we were saying before, is that like, there's people like me who, someone present an idea to me that like, do you want to live your life like that? People don't live their life like that. There's no way that that's the way that people live their life. You play flute in concert hall, drink wine, and, you know, play classical music in Thailand. That's insane. Nobody does that. And I was like, I don't know. You don't know that. I'm gonna challenge the notion. I don't think that that's it. And then there is the other type of people in the world where it's just like, well, if this person who I respect, and in this case happens to be my father, said so, that must have been the truth. And I think there's now this middle version in between, because I think our society has less of mentor-mentee relationships of a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming less and less of a thing because there's so many bad things that have happened for it. Like whether it's, like inappropriate sexual
Yeah.
conduct and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So that kind of relationships is not pursued anymore in school. But back then, when that used to be a thing, I feel like the most common thing that comes up with kids is that, like, hey, like, I wanted to do this, but I know that that's not something that you're supposed to do. So what's the second best thing that I can do? And you would
Yes.
go to like a head teacher's office asking these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of my friends having to do that in their last year of their music, the music high school degree. On their
Mm-hmm.
third year, everyone was like, yeah, as much as I dreamt about this, this wasn't really gonna work. So like, what else can I do instead? So some of them go into a music business program, and they
Mm-hmm.
started a piano teaching school or something afterwards.
Yeah.
Or some of them go into like live sound kind of degree, which actually has a lot more like technical chops to do work that's actually out there in the industry. So like, like
Mm-hmm.
running live sounds at concerts and stuff is a very high demand thing. But I actually don't believe in the compromise. I believe that people should be able to explore what they want to do. And I am actually I'm a little bit baffled by the fact that our educational system is not set up for that to be the possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's set up to
Yep.
find compromise for students with extreme interests to not pursue their extremes. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like, they use the argument of, oh, they want our kids to be like well-rounded or
Mm-hmm.
adaptable.
Or like this is the stable
Right.
path,
Right, exactly. Meanwhile, I see these digital nomads every day who's like making a bunch of money doing the most
Right?
random things. And I feel like, hey, if someone has unlocked this secret, so should everyone be able to,
Yeah.
right? And like,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone goes to school to become a digital nomad. I also don't think everyone goes to school to learn how to sell their products on Etsy or Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
But that's now a real career that I think is changing the world and
Mm-hmm.
the state of careers as we see it, right? So long way around of saying that, like, I just think that, like, for the next generations of folks, I think there's a lot more of the I want to do X thing. It's super niche and no one cares about
Yeah.
it, but I do. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna actually do what I care about. And I think
Yeah.
that should be embraced and not
Yeah.
like sort of, diminished in some ways. So
Yeah. That's it, and it's really cool that it's more open, like the world have opened up to that idea
yeah.
too. And I think through social media and like internet, like people see that more now, right? Like it's more visible, like
It's more visible, exactly.
yeah, and you can see like that's possible, like and I feel like the same where and that's why, and I knew you were a cool dude to talk about this because like it's like, well, now you can, especially now you can see, it's like, well, if she can do it, like I can do it too.
Yeah.
Like she's not special. And previously, or even I even would have thought like, who am I? Who am I? Like I'm a single mom, grew up in this like apartment, like who am I to, like I'm not rich, I don't have money, who am I to go pursue this horse training? Like
Yeah.
I
But that
can't.
question alone is like, it tells you that there's something wrong with society. That the fact that
Yeah.
the like, who am I to pursue this kind of career?
Mhm.
It implies that there is incoming judgment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And that's actually not a good state for our society to be in. Like that, it shouldn't be who am I to pursue this. It's like, oh, it's cool that Jenny is trying to do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
As weird as it may be, it's
Yeah.
like actually really cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. but it's cool that what's really cool is that you kind of you figured that out kind of on your own.
A little bit. I will say this, Jenny. I think what is really weird about me is that I think I had always been doing music for a really long time. So if you started me at the age of 15, because that was when I really entered a professional music school, right? I've been doing music half of my life now, 15 out of 30 years. But I think at different times of my life, I could really point out the times that I were doing it for the wrong reasons and the times that I was doing it for all the right reasons. And I think I have had to tweak my relationship with music many times over the course of the year because I have gotten into this rut of doing it for the wrong reasons so many times. Some of those wrong reasons include I want to prove to my dad that music career is a real thing. And I want to show it to him that I will make as much money as much as he has made before.
Right.
And then I got there and I lost all motivations I had about music. And I was just like, I have done this, so now what? And then I have to kind of ask myself again, do I still love music? Do I not? And I think to say that I figured it out on my own is kind of not true, actually. I feel like there had been many, I mentioned mentors and mentees before, but there were a lot of people along the way that I actually kind of consult, it's not a good word for it, but I really kind of bare my chest open to them about these issues I was going through. And like even the last 2.5 years where I went through another sort of like a tweak of purpose change on the way that I want to approach my career again. Without my therapist that I work with every week, I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am right now in terms of my relationship with my work and how I kind of separate music on the side. That's not like my work involves music, but my love for music shouldn't be my job. And it's actually like it's a very different thing, I feel like it's really hard to fathom that concept as a 15-year-old, right? You were just kind of like, I love music, I want to do this as a job. So when someone criticizes you, you're like, well, I suck, so I must not do this career. But there are plenty of musicians out there that are not like, like virtuosic, like they're not like the best, the most acrobatic musicians in the world, but they're good enough to be working in the industry. And that is not an offense to their ability, and they still love music as much as you do. It's just the level of excellence required to say become a piano teacher teaching a 5-year-old versus being a college teacher are two completely different things. And their love for music is still the same, so like the pursuit of excellence isn't related to your love for music. And I had that very unhealthy relationship of like, well, if you love music, you must pursue excellence.
Yes.
And I think that, like, I know I'm just saying a lot of things right now, but I feel like that these past 15 years is just the constant reevaluation of that, like, well, what are all these elements in my life about music that I like and that I kind of don't like, and that I have gotten into to find out that, oh, shit, I kind of hate this. Or, like part of it involves being part of the service industry. And I have discovered that's actually like there are elements of being in the service industry I love. Like, for example, I love convincing people to do anything at all. Like I like changing people's minds about something in general as just a concept, and I could do that all day. In like sort of in disconnection with music, but without those two things having to be together. So now I actually try to compartmentalize a lot of my sort of like thinking in that way, where it's just like, well, what do I like about this gig? It might involve the shittiest music that I have to make, but it actually involves a high level of self-ambassadoring and relationship building with this particular group of people or people. So I find my enjoyment from there instead.
Right.
And not the music itself. And like, I couldn't give less of an F about the music that I make for that project. But on the other hand, I could be also doing something where it's like, actually, people are kind of trash, and like it's really hard to work with this group of people, but the music that I get to make for this is gonna be so good.
Yeah.
So then now you hold on to a very different value on this specific thing than before. I wouldn't have been able to do that as like a 20, 25-year-old, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think the maturity that comes with handling this kind of compartmentalization in your brain, it didn't come on its own. I think it kind of like, it really came with the experience and working with a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. And like you said, like, and about my kind of journey of figuring my life out too, is like I'm like I'm thinking this is the perfect time. Like, you know what I'm like, you know,
because you've tweaked all these relationships with the things that you love, right? It's like you've actually kind of like retweaked a lot of the stuff along the way before you got into this part of your life where you're like, now I have a healthy understanding of what of these each components in my life and how they function to my love for those elements of my life.
Yeah, it's true. And the maturity and a lot more knowing of like who I am and who you like who you are as a person.
The one thing that I like really pointed myself out in this way when I felt like I was really struggling was I told Steph, and I was like, I have a hard time introducing myself to people without saying my job title.
Yeah.
And then I think that was when I realized I'm in deep trouble of like not understanding my relationship between who I am and who my work is.
Yeah.
Or what my work is and who am I at work. And it's really hard. Like I felt like I'd sunk myself for so long into doing this music thing as my identity, right? So then for my job to be music related, that felt like my job was also my identity. And then I got to work for a company that I love, PlayStation, right? I wore that badge as my identity too.
Yeah.
So then now I walk out there into like a pickup soccer game with a bunch of random strangers, and I like introduced myself. I gave them my full position name. You know, I'm a senior music editor, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I might as well just hand a business card out at this point, you know, like. And I think that was really kind of an awakening, and that happened just 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long ago. I felt like I really struggled at that time to find out, despite having a success in my career, to like kind of understand who I am. And then now I feel like if, you know, like what the introduction I did just then before, just like an hour ago now, it seems. Wow, time went by so fast.
I know, right? I know.
I didn't mention what company I work for once. And I think it's a lot. I have a much, it's still not perfect, but I have a much better sense of self now, distinctively detached from my job than before.
Yeah. Well, as a society, that's like, that's the thing you do, right? It's like you meet someone, it's like, oh, what do you do? What's like, as in that's what's gonna like be my worth, you know, like where, and that's gonna change how you look at me or how we would, right, like portray ourselves. So because it's funny, because I think about that a lot now too, of like, who am I, like who is Jenny, like who am I as a person, without being like I'm not a mom, but, you know, but like some people might think like their identity as a mom is like so connected or so strong, and they don't, then it's like they don't know who they are outside of that. Or I think of that a lot more now too, and that's probably also maturity. Like being older now too. I mean, I don't know.
Would you say that you can now do that introduction of yourself better than you did like 5 years ago?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, so
I would think
I
so.
think that to me enough is already like it shows the tremendous growth that one could have, right? I think it's like self-introduction seemed like a small thing, but it says a lot about a person.